Welcome back, Army and pop culture detectives. BTS has conquered the globe and shared their blood, sweat, and tears with us, but there is one thing they fiercely protect: their romantic lives. Have you ever wondered why 7 incredibly successful guys never step out with a significant other? Is it just strict agency rules, or is there a much deeper, heartbreaking sacrifice happening behind closed doors? What is the real emotional toll of global fame? We are counting down the top 7 hidden reasons BTS keeps their love lives completely in the dark. And trust me, number 1 will absolutely touch every Army's heart. Are you ready to uncover the untold truth? Let's get into it. Number 7. RM, the heavy weight of global leadership. When you step back and look at Kim Namjoon, the brilliant leader of BTS, better known as RM, you are not just looking at a pop star or an exceptionally gifted rapper. You are looking at a man who carries the heavy responsibility of being the articulate global ambassador for one of the most influential cultural phenomena in human history. From delivering speeches at the United Nations General Assembly to representing South Korean youth and Asian artists at the White House, RM's public persona operates under a microscope that few human beings on this planet will ever truly understand. Every single word he utters, every gesture he makes, every book he recommends, and every piece of art he visits is instantly dissected, translated into dozens of languages, and debated across global media outlets. In an environment where every action carries geopolitical and cultural weight, introducing a public romantic relationship is not simply a personal life update, it is a seismic event that could alter the trajectory of the entire group and completely dismantle the private world of anyone who steps into his inner circle. RM understands better than anyone that love requires vulnerability, peace, and mutual protection, but the world he navigates every single day is defined by relentless noise, intrusive paparazzi, and hyper-analyzed public perception. Imagine trying to build a genuine, fragile romantic connection when every coffee shop visit or quiet walk in a park could be secretly photographed by Sasang fans or turned into a global trending topic within seconds. If RM were to openly date someone, that individual would immediately lose their anonymity forever, subjected to intense online scrutiny, background checks by eager internet detectives, and unavoidable harassment from toxic online quarters. Throughout BTS's extraordinary journey, RM has consistently chosen to shield those he cares about from this overwhelming whirlwind, treating his personal life as a sacred sanctuary that exists completely outside the public eye. When you listen closely to his solo artistic works, particularly his poignant mixtape Mono and his debut solo album Indigo, you begin to hear the quiet echoes of a man who wrestles deeply with isolation, identity, and the heavy price of global stardom. In tracks like Wildflower and Lonely, RM lays bare the raw emotional cost of living on a pedestal where everyone knows your name, yet very few truly know your soul. He sings about wanting to be a simple, quiet wildflower anchored firmly to the ground rather than a flashy, brief burst of flame that burns out in the sky, reflecting a profound longing for a grounded, quiet existence away from the blinding light of stadium stage lamps. This artistic honesty reveals that his decision to keep his love life strictly hidden is far from a cold corporate directive or a shallow attempt to maintain an idol image. Rather, it is a deeply considered, mature strategy to preserve the sanity and emotional well-being of the person he might love. RM views privacy as the ultimate act of romance and chivalry in the digital age. By keeping his personal relationships entirely in the dark, he creates a safe space where authentic feelings can grow naturally, completely unburdened by public expectations, media narratives, or fan commentary. He refuses to allow the person he holds dear to become collateral damage in the intense circus of global celebrity culture. For RM, true love is not about grand public declarations or matching couple posts on social media. It is about quiet conversations, shared silence, mutual trust, and building a quiet haven where Kim Nam-joon can just be a normal young man from Ilsan, far away from the global icon RM who carries the world on his shoulders. This profound level of discipline, foresight, and protective instinct shows just how deeply he respects love, choosing silence over public validation every single time. Number 6. Jin, the protective shield of the eldest brother. When we talk about Kim Seok-jin, the eldest member of BTS, we often get completely caught up in his dazzling worldwide handsome persona, his infectious windshield wiper laugh, and his unmatched ability to break the ice in any awkward room. But beneath that brilliant comedic timing and breathtaking visual appeal lies a fiercely protective older brother who understands the lethal, destructive cost of fame better than almost anyone else in the industry. Jin originally entered the entertainment world with quiet dreams of becoming an actor, studying diligently at the prestigious Jungkook University, completely unaware that he would eventually become the crucial emotional anchor for a global music phenomenon that would rewrite history. Being the eldest in traditional Korean culture carries an immense unspoken weight. You are expected to be the unshakable pillar of strength, the silent provider of comfort, and the ultimate shield that absorbs the harshest blows from the outside world so that the younger ones can thrive in safety. Jin has spent the last decade perfectly mastering the delicate art of deflection, actively using his outrageous dad jokes, his blowing kisses, and his exaggerated self-confidence to expertly draw the media's relentless attention away from the more sensitive, introverted, or exhausted members of the group. This exact same defensive mechanism, this brilliant strategy of hiding in plain sight, is precisely why he keeps his romantic life locked away in an impenetrable, heavily guarded fortress. Jin knows with absolute certainty that the very moment he introduces a romantic partner to the world, the media will relentlessly and ruthlessly dig into her past, her family, her career, and her most private moments, completely stripping away the very normalcy he so desperately craves when he finally steps off the blinding stadium stage. Over the years, Jin has shown us small, subtle glimpses of his profound need for strict boundaries. He rarely shares the intricate personal details of his immediate family. He quietly supported his older brother's restaurant business without ever making it a massive, exploitative media spectacle. And he has always maintained a rigid, uncompromising dividing line between Kim Seok-jin, the untouchable global superstar, and Kim Seok-jin, the regular guy who just loves playing video games for hours, fishing in the early morning silence, and cooking quiet meals at home. To bring a romantic partner into the blinding, scorching spotlight of BTS's fame would be a direct, unforgivable violation of his core instinct to protect those he loves from the toxicity of public consumption. Furthermore, we have to deeply consider the monumental emotional and psychological transition Jin had to endure as the very first member of BTS to enlist in the South Korean military. Imagine the immense, suffocating pressure of leaving behind the biggest peak of your historic career, stepping into a completely isolated, disciplined environment, and carrying the anxiety of an uncertain future, all while the entire globe watches your every single move, scrutinizing your haircut, your training photos, and your military updates. How could anyone ethically or fairly ask a romantic partner to endure that kind of intense, globally televised separation and anxiety? Jin's deeply personal solo music, particularly beautifully haunting tracks like Abyss, Epiphany, and The Astronaut, reveals a profoundly introspective man who frequently grapples with overwhelming feelings of inadequacy, mental exhaustion, and the terrifying hollow void that sometimes accompanies massive, unprecedented success. And Abyss, he bravely confessed his severe burnout and the overwhelming feeling of drowning in the immense pressure of his own towering achievements, showing a vulnerable, fragile side that directly contradicts his consistently upbeat public image. For a man whose internal world is so deeply complex, sensitive, and carefully guarded, romantic love must naturally serve as a sanctuary of absolute peace, a quiet place completely devoid of flashing paparazzi cameras, aggressive trending hashtags, and dispatch reporters hiding in the bushes outside his apartment building. Jin views privacy not as a strict corporate restriction or a sneaky secret, but as the ultimate, highest form of care and devotion, a necessary, life-saving barrier that ensures his loved ones never have to experience the suffocating anxiety of being judged and scrutinized by millions of anonymous strangers every single day of their lives. He has dedicated the entirety of his 20s to taking care of 6 younger brothers, willingly sacrificing his own personal milestones and youth to ensure BTS reached the absolute pinnacle of global success. And now, as he confidently navigates his 30s and his highly anticipated post-military life, he fiercely defends his human right to have one single sacred aspect of his life that belongs entirely and exclusively to him. By keeping his love life a total, unsolvable mystery, Jin actively guarantees that when he finally does fall in love, or if he already has, the relationship is deeply rooted in a foundation of genuine human connection, mutual respect, and quiet intimacy, rather than the toxic, highly publicized, and ultimately destructive reality of modern celebrity dating. He deeply wants to be loved for the quiet, thoughtful, gaming-obsessed, traditional alcohol-brewing man he truly is behind closed doors, not the flawless, untouchable idol the world selfishly demands him to be. To achieve that pure, untainted love, he knows he must keep the heavy, impenetrable velvet curtain tightly drawn over his personal affairs, performing the most profound act of love imaginable in his position, giving his partner the priceless, beautiful gift of invisibility, ensuring they can live a completely normal, happy life entirely untouched by the chaotic madness of global fame. Number 5. Suga, the silent observer of a harsh reality. When you peel back the complex, heavily guarded layers of Min Yoongi, known globally as the brilliant BTS producer Suga, and his intensely raw alter ego August D, you uncover a profoundly intricate individual who has literally fought his way from the freezing, impoverished underground hip-hop scene in Daegu to the highest, most elite echelons of the global music industry, carrying physical and emotional scars that fundamentally shape how he views human connection, trust, and romantic relationships. Suga's journey is not a polished, manufactured idol fairy tale carefully crafted by a corporate PR team. It is a gritty, painful, and ultimately triumphant saga of survival, battling severe depression, crippling social anxiety, and a debilitating shoulder injury he sustained while secretly working as a teenage delivery boy just to pay his university tuition and buy a cheap bowl of noodles. In a modern entertainment world completely obsessed with superficial appearances, fleeting social media romances, and manufactured chemistry, Yoongi is the ultimate silent observer, a highly intelligent man who has witnessed the absolute darkest, most cutthroat corners of the music industry and has learned through brutal first-hand experience that extreme privacy is not just a luxury afforded to the rich and famous, it is a strict, non-negotiable matter of emotional survival. When you listen to his devastatingly honest solo tracks like The Last, Amygdala, or Snooze, he violently tears down the shiny, perfect, untouchable facade of K-pop to openly discuss his psychiatric treatments, his deepest unhealed traumas, the suffocating pressure of expectations, and the terrifying memories he wishes he could erase from his brain. A man who processes his immense pain with such fierce, bleeding vulnerability naturally approaches the fragile concept of romantic love with extreme caution, knowing full well that giving his heart to someone means exposing his absolute most delicate, unguarded self to a chaotic world that constantly weaponizes vulnerability and twists truth for clickbait headlines. For Yoongi, the genius workaholic producer who spends countless agonizingly lonely hours locked inside his heavily guarded, dimly lit studio known as Genius Lab, music has always been his first love, his primary coping mechanism, and his most faithful companion through his darkest, most isolated nights. To introduce a romantic partner into this highly protected, intensely solitary sanctuary would require a level of absolute, unshakable trust that is incredibly difficult to build when you are one of the most famous and recognizable men on the planet, constantly surrounded by people who may have ulterior motives, hidden agendas, or a desperate desire for a piece of the BTS spotlight. Furthermore, Yoongi's conceptualization of love, as brilliantly and meticulously articulated in tracks like Trivia, Seesaw, is incredibly mature, completely stripped of all naive childhood illusions, and acutely aware of the exhausting, repetitive emotional labor that real adult relationships inevitably demand. He does not view love through the rose-tinted, highly idealized glasses of a cheesy romantic comedy. He views it through the realistic, slightly cynical, but deeply grounded lens of a pragmatic survivor who understands that fierce passion can easily turn into a suffocating, destructive burden if it is not carefully nurtured, protected, and communicated in a safe, completely private environment. The intense, almost suffocating global spotlight that follows BTS every single second of the day is the exact opposite of a safe environment. It is a chaotic, intensely judgmental arena where an idol's romantic partner would be instantly ripped apart, their entire past ruthlessly scrutinized by internet sleuths, their physical appearance viciously debated, and their character completely assassinated by relentless, faceless online mobs. Yoongi, who is fiercely protective and fundamentally deeply loyal to his closely knit inner circle, would never in a million years subject someone he genuinely cares about to that kind of toxic, soul-crushing public execution just to satisfy the public's insatiable curiosity. He knows all too well that the media loves nothing more than to build idols up to unimaginable heights only to violently tear them down, and a public romance is often the easiest, most profitable target for malicious tabloids and desperate paparazzi looking for a viral scandal to monetize. By keeping his love life locked in absolute impenetrable silence, Yoongi is effectively building a massive, heavily fortified titanium wall around his personal peace, actively ensuring that the cutthroat, unforgiving reality of his professional life never poisons or destroys his private happiness. He is deeply aware that his monumental fame is both a miraculous, life-changing blessing and a terrifying, heavy curse, and he actively refuses to let the curse infect the quiet, normal, mundane moments he so desperately craves, like making a quiet cup of coffee in the morning, softly strumming his guitar, or simply sitting in comforting, warm silence with a loved one, without the terrifying, blinding flash of a camera lens breaking the peace. This intense dedication to total privacy is also deeply connected to his immense respect for ARMY. He wants the relationship between BTS and his fans to remain strictly and purely focused on the music, the healing message, the artistic journey, and the mutual support, rather than getting derailed, cheapened, or distracted by sensationalized gossip and cheap celebrity drama. He wants to be judged solely by the impeccable quality of his beats, the brutal honesty of his lyrics, and the comfort he provides to millions of struggling, marginalized people around the world, completely and permanently separating his identity as an iconic global artist from his identity as a private romantic partner. When you critically analyze the demanding, relentless schedule that BTS has maintained for well over a decade, often functioning on practically zero sleep, constantly flying across multiple time zones, and carrying the unprecedented crushing burden of being South Korea's biggest economic and cultural export, you quickly realize that sustaining a healthy, deeply connected romantic relationship borders on the statistically impossible. Yoongi himself has openly stated in past interviews that he simply doesn't have the time, the physical energy, or the emotional bandwidth to give a partner the profound attention and dedication they deserve, a heartbreakingly honest admission from a man who refuses to do absolutely anything halfway in his life. If Min Yoongi commits to something, whether it is producing a chart-topping, history-making album or deeply loving another human being, he commits with his entire soul, his blood, and his tears, and he is acutely aware that the current frenetic pace of his extraordinary life makes that level of absolute dedication incredibly difficult to achieve without causing pain to the other person. He understands that genuine, lasting love requires consistency, physical presence, deep emotional availability, and the mundane, beautiful quietness of everyday routine. Things that his current global superstar status effectively stole from him a very long time ago when he signed his first contract. Therefore, keeping his romantic aspirations completely hidden from the public eye is not just a PR strategy, it is a profound act of self-preservation and deep respect for the sheer gravity and sanctity of love itself. He will not treat love as a casual, fleeting distraction, a quick public relations stunt to boost relevance, or a game to be played for the cameras. He will wait patiently in the shadows, focusing on his own healing and his monumental career until he can fiercely protect and fully nurture a relationship far away from the invasive, demanding, and often cruel eyes of the entire world. The horrifying thought of his partner being harassed by malicious anti-fans, having their privacy entirely stripped away, and being reduced to nothing more than Suga's girlfriend or Suga's partner, is a nightmare that Yoongi, a man who has fiercely battled for his own mental peace and independence, simply will not tolerate for a single second. He demands absolute respect for his personal boundaries, and his ironclad, unbroken silence on his dating life is his ultimate, most powerful way of taking back control in a chaotic world that constantly demands to consume every single piece of his existence, proving that true love for August D is found in the quiet, fiercely protected shadows far away from the blinding, burning lights of the stadium stage. Number 4. J-Hope, the blinding sunshine with a hidden shadow. When we turn our attention to Jungkook, universally adored by millions across the globe as J-Hope, we are instantly met with the image of a blindingly bright human sun, a relentlessly optimistic mood maker who seems to radiate boundless energy, infectious laughter, and pure, unadulterated joy wherever he goes. But beneath that meticulously maintained, dazzlingly cheerful exterior lies one of the most fiercely disciplined, intensely private, and complex minds in the entire global entertainment industry. To understand why J-Hope fiercely guards his romantic life, we must first deeply understand the monumental psychological divide between J-Hope, the untouchable superstar, and Jungkook, the regular human being from Gwangju, a divide he explored with devastating, raw honesty in his critically acclaimed solo album Jack in the Box, where he finally stripped away the bright, colorful pop aesthetic to reveal a deeply anxious, burdened burdened artist wrestling with the suffocating weight of his own monumental success and the terrifying expectations of the world. As the undisputed dance leader and the strict, uncompromising performance director behind the scenes for BTS, J-Hope carries a colossal, unrelenting professional burden, demanding absolute perfection from himself and his members to ensure that every single stadium show, every single music video, and every single television performance is flawlessly executed down to the microscopic millisecond, a level of extreme dedication that leaves practically zero room for the unpredictable, often chaotic, and deeply vulnerable nature of a public romantic relationship. You have to understand that maintaining the J-Hope persona requires a superhuman level of emotional labor and physical stamina. He is constantly expected to be the smiling face, the energetic battery, and the comforting anchor for both his fellow members and for the millions of armies who rely on his radiant positivity to get through their own dark, difficult days. If he were to introduce a romantic partner into this intensely pressurized, hyper-visible reality, that person would not only have to date Jungkook, the man, they would be inextricably forced to share the colossal, exhausting burden of dating J-Hope, the global icon, instantly becoming a massive, shining target for intense global media scrutiny, relentless tabloid gossip, and the unavoidable toxic vitriol of obsessive anti-fans who lurk in the dark corners of the internet. We only have to look at the massive, overwhelming public attention that follows his older sister, Jung-Ji-Woo, a highly successful fashion entrepreneur and influencer, who, despite her own independent, hard-earned success, has had to navigate the incredibly tricky, often toxic waters of being intimately associated with a BTS member, facing intense scrutiny, invasive questions, and occasional unwarranted backlash simply because of her bloodline. J-Hope, who loves his family with a fierce, unwavering devotion, has watched firsthand how the scorching, unforgiving spotlight of his unprecedented fame can easily burn those closest to him, and as a man deeply rooted in a sense of protective duty, he would never consciously choose to drag the woman he loves into that terrifying, unpredictable arena where her past, her career, her appearance, and every single one of her social media posts would be violently dissected by millions of absolute strangers on a daily basis. The sheer magnitude of his solo endeavors, particularly his historic, groundbreaking headline performance at Lollapalooza in Chicago, affectionately dubbed Hobbapalooza by adoring fans worldwide, proved just how immense the pressure on his shoulders truly is when he steps out onto the world stage alone, carrying the pride of South Korea and the reputation of BTS on his back for over an hour of relentless, grueling live performance. Preparing for that level of historic, unprecedented artistry requires a singular, obsessive focus that leaves very little room for nurturing a new romance, meaning any established relationship must be built on a foundation of extraordinary patience, quiet understanding, and absolute, unquestionable privacy. For Hoseok, love is not supposed to be a stressful public performance to be consumed, judged, and debated by the masses. It is meant to be a quiet, deeply secure, and grounding sanctuary, a profoundly safe space where he can completely take off the heavy, exhausting jack-in-the-box mask, drop the relentless sunshine persona, and simply be allowed to be tired, vulnerable, quiet, and intimately human without feeling the constant nagging pressure to entertain or smile for an invisible camera. When you truly listen to his deeply introspective lyrics in tracks like Blue Side or Arson, you hear a man who is incredibly self-aware of the destructive, burning nature of his own massive ambition and the terrifying, lonely isolation that inevitably comes when you reach the absolute pinnacle of global success, realizing that the brighter the light of fame shines upon him, the much darker and longer his shadow becomes. He knows that bringing a fragile, burgeoning romantic relationship into that blinding light would almost certainly destroy it, turning something pure and beautiful into a chaotic, unmanageable media circus that would slowly drain the genuine affection and trust right out of it. J-Hope's supreme, unwavering dedication to his craft, his members, and his fans have defined the entirety of his youth, and he has willingly, graciously sacrificed the normal, everyday experiences of a young man in his 20s, like going on casual movie dates, holding hands in a public park, or spontaneously traveling with a partner, all to build the historic, unparalleled legacy of BTS, a sacrifice that most average people cannot even begin to genuinely comprehend. Now, as he matures into his 30s and navigates the profound, life-altering experience of his mandatory South Korean military service, serving as an elite, highly respected assistant training instructor, his perspective on privacy, love, and what truly matters in life has undoubtedly deepened even further, reinforcing his ironclad boundary between what belongs to the world and what belongs strictly, exclusively to him. By maintaining absolute, unbreakable silence regarding his love life, J-Hope is performing the ultimate, most selfless act of love for his future or current partner. He is gifting them the priceless, incredibly rare luxury of normalcy, ensuring they can enjoy a quiet dinner, a peaceful walk, and a secure, trusting relationship completely shielded from the ravenous, intrusive appetite of the global pop culture machine that constantly demands to consume every single piece of its idols. He wants to be deeply, genuinely loved, not for the millions of dollars in his bank account, not for the sold-out Wembley Stadium tickets, and certainly not for his flawless, gravity-defying dance moves, but for the quiet, thoughtful, and incredibly organized and deeply sensitive man he is when the stage lights finally go black and the roaring crowds have all gone home. Until the day comes when he feels it is absolutely safe and entirely necessary to share that deeply intimate part of his universe, J-Hope will continue to keep his romantic life locked tightly in the darkest, most secure vault, smiling brightly for the flashing cameras, while fiercely, uncompromisingly protecting the quiet, beautiful peace of his personal sanctuary, proving that even the brightest sunshine knows exactly how to keep his most precious treasures safely hidden in the cool, protective shade. Number 3. Jimin, the fragile heart of a perfectionist, exposed. When we shift our focus to Park Jimin, the mesmerizing main dancer and ethereal lead vocalist of BTS, we are stepping into an incredibly delicate, intensely complicated emotional territory that perfectly encapsulates the absolute darkest, most terrifying double-edged sword of global idol fame. Known affectionately as the emotional core, the comforting angel, and the mesmerizing it boy of the South Korean music industry, Jimin possesses a transcendent, almost hypnotic onstage charisma that draws people in with a magnetic, unavoidable pull. But this exact same enchanting allure makes him one of the most fiercely scrutinized, obsessively monitored, and heavily targeted celebrities on the face of the earth. To understand why Jimin guards his romantic life with a level of secrecy that rivals state intelligence, we must first deeply acknowledge the terrifying, often disturbing reality of his extreme popularity, a level of fame that has unfortunately attracted some of the most dangerously obsessive, aggressively possessive factions of the global K-pop fandom. For years, Jimin has been the unfortunate, involuntary center of intense, highly toxic shipping wars, and has even been the horrifying target of multiple highly publicized death threats that required massive, unprecedented security protocols during BTS's international stadium tours, forcing him to perform incredibly demanding, emotionally draining sets while bearing the suffocating, terrifying knowledge that his physical safety was actively under threat. Imagine carrying that monumental, soul-crushing psychological burden while trying to maintain the flawless, smiling, comforting persona of Jimin that millions of people desperately rely on for their daily happiness and emotional stability. Now try to imagine bringing a fragile, deeply personal romantic relationship into that exact same volatile, highly dangerous environment. Jimin is acutely, painfully aware that the very second he publicly claims a romantic partner, that individual would instantly become the prime target of a vicious, coordinated, and relentless global hate campaign, spearheaded by deeply disturbed anti-fans and possessive solo stans who fundamentally believe they own him. The sheer volume of malicious comments, invasive stalking, and psychological warfare his partner would have to endure is a horrifying prospect that Jimin, a man whose fundamental nature is deeply empathetic, nurturing, and fiercely protective of his loved ones, simply cannot and will not ever allow to happen. Beyond the terrifying external threats, we must also deeply examine Jimin's own complex internal landscape, a fiercely guarded psychological space defined by an almost paralyzing, punishing level of perfectionism that he has battled since his grueling, highly competitive days as a top student at the prestigious Busan High School of Arts, where he specialized in contemporary dance. For well over a decade, Jimin has pushed his physical body and his mental endurance to the absolute breaking limits, famously surviving on practically no sleep in the practice room, enduring extreme, highly damaging crash diets in the early years of his career to fit a specific aesthetic standard, and constantly beating himself up over microscopic vocal mistakes that absolutely no one else in the roaring stadium even noticed. He is his own harshest, most unforgiving critic, constantly striving to present a flawless, impossibly perfect image to the world because he carries a deep-seated, incredibly vulnerable fear of disappointing the people who love and support him. When you listen to the raw, visceral, and uncomfortably honest tracks on his monumental solo debut album, Face, and his follow-up masterpiece, Muse, particularly the agonizingly raw emotions expressed in songs like Alone and Set Me Free Part 2, you hear the desperate, echoing cries of a man who spent the pandemic completely isolated, drowning in his own dark thoughts, relying on alcohol to numb the profound loneliness, and furiously battling the crushing, overwhelming weight of an identity that felt completely disconnected from his true human self. The album was a brutal, beautiful exorcism of his deepest insecurities, revealing that behind the glittering Chanel jewelry, the flawless stage makeup, and the breathtaking, gravity-defying dance moves lies a deeply sensitive, incredibly vulnerable young man who is still desperately trying to figure out who he is outside of the blinding BTS spotlight. For a soul this sensitive, this empathetic, and this prone to intense emotional exhaustion, a romantic relationship cannot be a public spectacle or a strategic PR move. It absolutely must be a strictly private, heavily fortified sanctuary, where the impossibly high, suffocating expectations of the world are permanently left at the door. Jimin deeply needs a quiet, safe, and completely unjudged space where he doesn't have to be the flawless contemporary dancer, the high-note-hitting vocalist, or the comforting angel to millions. A place where he can simply be Park Jimin, a normal 20-something guy from Busan who loves hanging out with his closest friends, eating spicy street food, and making silly jokes without the paralyzing fear of being harshly criticized or entirely misunderstood by the media. He understands that genuine intimacy requires extreme vulnerability, the messy, beautiful act of letting someone see your absolute worst, most insecure, and completely unpolished sides. And that level of raw emotional exposure is completely impossible when every single aspect of your life is being constantly broadcasted, analyzed, and monetized by the global entertainment machine. Now, as he navigates the demanding, highly disciplined reality of his South Korean military enlistment alongside his fellow member Jungkook in the artillery division, stepping away from the glamour and the adoration to fulfill his duty as a regular citizen, the contrast between his superstar life and his desire for grounded normalcy has never been more stark. By keeping his love life entirely in the shadows, locked away from the flashing cameras and the invasive headlines, Jimin is not only protecting his future or current partner from the terrifying, predatory nature of toxic celebrity culture, but he is also fiercely guarding his own fragile, healing heart, ensuring that his romantic connections remain pure, untainted, and completely free from the toxic, transactional nature of the modern industry. He absolutely refuses to let his personal happiness become just another piece of highly consumed, quickly discarded content for the internet to devour and destroy. In a world that constantly demands he give every single piece of his soul, his body, and his artistry to the public for their entertainment, Jimin has strategically and bravely drawn a massive, unbreakable line in the sand, deciding that his romantic life is the one sacred, beautiful thing he will stubbornly keep for himself, protecting it with the quiet, fierce determination of a man who knows exactly how much a broken heart truly costs in the unforgiving, blinding spotlight of global superstardom. Number 2. V. The nostalgic dreamer trapped in a glass castle. When we turn our attention to Kim Tae-young, globally celebrated and relentlessly admired as V, we are immediately confronted with one of the most fascinating, heart-wrenching paradoxes in the entire modern entertainment industry: the ultimate old-fashioned romantic soul who is completely trapped inside the blinding, hyper-surveilled glass castle of unprecedented global fame. Tae-young is a man out of time, a deeply nostalgic, fiercely artistic spirit who finds profound comfort in the crackling sounds of vintage vinyl records, the melancholic trumpet solos of Chet Baker, the timeless cinematic beauty of classic black-and-white films, and the simple, grounding joy of walking through quiet, empty art museums. Yet he exists in a hyper-modern digital reality where his every single breath, glance, and accidental social media click is instantly broadcasted to billions of people and ruthlessly dissected by relentless tabloids and obsessive internet sleuths. To understand why V guards his romantic life with such absolute, impenetrable secrecy, you have to realize that he does not just want a casual, fleeting celebrity fling. He desperately craves the kind of deep, soulful, cinematic romance that he so beautifully sings about in his hauntingly atmospheric solo album, Layover, a masterpiece of R&B and jazz that drips with profound longing, isolation, and a desperate yearning for genuine human connection amidst the chaotic noise of the world. Imagine being fundamentally wired to love deeply and openly, to want nothing more than to casually hold your partner's hand while strolling down a cobblestone street in Paris, or to sit quietly in a small, dimly lit jazz club without a care in the world, but knowing with absolute terrifying certainty that attempting to do so would instantly trigger a dangerous, uncontrollable global mob, aggressive paparazzi chases, and a terrifying invasion of privacy that would fundamentally destroy the very peace you are trying to build. Tae-young's visual appeal is so globally recognized, consistently topping lists for the most handsome face on the planet and serving as the ultimate global ambassador for massive luxury houses like Celine and Cartier, that he has essentially become a walking, breathing target for unparalleled public obsession. This means that absolutely anyone he even remotely associates with, whether it is a close platonic friend, a stylist, a co-star from his acting days in the drama Hwarang, or a rumored romantic partner, is immediately subjected to a horrifying, relentless barrage of online harassment, intense character assassination, and a severe, unforgivable invasion of their personal life. We have seen this terrifying dynamic play out time and time again. If V simply glances in the direction of another celebrity at an award show, or if a grainy, entirely unverified photograph surfaces in the darkest corners of the internet, the entire global timeline erupts into absolute chaos, forcing massive PR companies into emergency lockdown mode and leaving immense, devastating emotional collateral damage in its wake. How could a man as deeply empathetic, fiercely loyal, and fiercely protective as Taehyung ever willingly subject someone he genuinely loves to that kind of toxic, terrifying, and utterly exhausting public crucifixion? We must also remember the profound emotional resilience Taehyung had to build early on in his career, famously enduring the devastating, heartbreaking loss of his beloved grandmother, the woman who practically raised him on a quiet strawberry farm and shaped his entire worldview, while still having to smile brightly and perform flawlessly for millions of screaming fans on stage, a deeply traumatic experience that taught him the brutal, agonizing difference between what he owes the demanding public and what he must ruthlessly protect for his own psychological survival. This painful lesson in public grief undoubtedly solidified his absolute resolve to build an impenetrable titanium fortress around his private joys, knowing that the current celebrity gossip ecosystem does not care about the truth, emotional well-being, or basic human decency. It only cares about generating viral clicks, sensationalizing intimate moments, and feeding the insatiable, often highly destructive curiosity of the masses. For a free-spirited artist who affectionately refers to himself as a winter bear, someone who values raw authenticity, quiet moments playing with his beloved Pomeranian Yentan, and the deep, unbreakable brotherhood of his fiercely protective inner circle known as the Wooga Squad, the suffocating reality of his fame must often feel like a heavy, golden cage, entirely stripping him of the fundamental human right to explore romance at a natural, unforced pace. When you listen to his deeply personal, self-composed tracks like Scenery, Winter Bear, or Snowflower, you are quite literally hearing the intimate, unfiltered diary of a man who desperately wishes to capture the fleeting, beautiful, ordinary moments of life through the lens of his vintage film camera, completely untouched by the scorching, artificial stadium lights. If Taehyung were to openly date, that beautiful, quiet romance would be instantly hijacked by the entire world, commodified into endless trending topics, overanalyzed by body language experts on YouTube, and ultimately robbed of its most vital, fragile ingredient, genuine intimacy. Furthermore, as he currently undertakes his incredibly grueling, highly dangerous mandatory military service as a member of South Korea's elite special duty team, engaging in intense counter-terrorism training and fundamentally pushing his physical and mental limits far, far away from the glamour of high-fashion magazine covers, the stark, jarring contrast between his untouchable superstar persona and his raw, unfiltered human reality has never been more incredibly pronounced. This intense period of isolation, strict discipline, and profound personal growth away from the blinding cameras has undoubtedly reinforced his deeply held, unshakable belief that some things in this fleeting life are simply too precious, too fragile, and too incredibly sacred to ever be shared with a world that constantly demands to consume every single piece of his existence. Taehyung keeps his love life entirely hidden in the deep shadows because he is fiercely, unapologetically determined to protect the pure, cinematic beauty of his own heart, flat out refusing to let the modern, toxic celebrity machine tarnish the kind of old-school, deeply devoted romance he so beautifully believes in. He is patiently, quietly holding out for a profound love that exists strictly in the unrecorded moments, in the warm, comforting silence between two people who truly understand each other's souls, completely free from the terrifying, blinding flash of paparazzi lenses, ultimately proving to the entire world that the biggest it boy of our generation considers his absolute, uncompromising privacy to be the most luxurious, non-negotiable treasure in his entire universe. Number 1. Jungkook, the Golden Machini's ultimate sacrifice for an unbreakable bond. When we finally arrive at the absolute pinnacle of this countdown, focusing our undivided attention on Jungkook, the extraordinarily gifted, relentlessly passionate Golden Machini of BTS, we uncover a profoundly emotional, heart-wrenching truth that completely transcends standard PR strategies and touches the very core of what it means to dedicate your entire human existence to millions of people you have never even met. To truly comprehend why Jungkook keeps his romantic life completely shrouded in impenetrable secrecy, we have to travel all the way back to 2013, when a shy, wide-eyed 15-year-old boy from Busan packed up his entire life, left the comforting safety of his family home, and threw himself into the grueling, ruthlessly competitive trainee system of Seoul, effectively surrendering his entire adolescence, his high school memories, and every single aspect of a normal youth to pursue a seemingly impossible dream. Jungkook quite literally grew up in the blinding, unforgiving spotlight, heavily guarded and meticulously raised by his 6 older brothers, but more importantly, he was fundamentally shaped, nurtured, and fiercely protected by the unwavering, colossal love of ARMY. For Jungkook, the relationship he shares with his fandom is not just a standard celebrity-fan dynamic, it is the absolute defining, central pillar of his entire identity, a breathtakingly pure, intensely intimate bond that he physically immortalized by boldly tattooing the word ARMY across his knuckles, ensuring that the very hands he uses to hold his microphone, wipe his sweat, and greet the world are forever branded with the name of the people who built his empire. This level of extreme, permanent devotion reveals the ultimate hidden reason why a public romantic relationship is practically impossible for him at this stage of his life. His heart is already completely, overwhelmingly occupied by an unprecedented, historic bond that demands absolute loyalty, terrifying vulnerability, and constant emotional maintenance. Just think about his legendary, record-breaking live streams on Weavers, where millions of people across the globe tune in at 3 o'clock in the morning just to watch the biggest pop star on the planet quietly fold his laundry, cook midnight snacks, sing impromptu karaoke covers for hours on end, and literally fall asleep on camera, snoring softly while millions of fans watch over him in a profound, incredibly beautiful display of mutual trust and parasocial intimacy that has never ever been seen before in the history of the music industry. These incredibly raw, unscripted moments are his unique way of inviting ARMY into his most private, unguarded sanctuary, completely breaking down the massive, artificial wall that usually separates global idols from their consumers. Now, pause and imagine the catastrophic, earth-shattering disruption that would occur if he were to suddenly introduce a public romantic partner into this carefully cultivated, highly fragile ecosystem of trust and shared vulnerability. Jungkook is profoundly, painfully aware that bringing a significant other into his world would instantly, irrevocably alter the pure, unfiltered dynamic he has spent more than a decade building with his fans, transforming his quiet, comforting late-night sanctuary into a highly controversial, heavily debated spectacle that would inevitably cause immense emotional pain for both his partner and a significant portion of his deeply devoted fandom. We must remember that this is the same incredibly sensitive young man who used to cry secretly in the bathroom when he first moved to Seoul because he missed his parents so much, the same boy who poured all of his unexpressed emotions into beautiful, soulful covers of romantic ballads on YouTube just to connect with the fans who were cheering for him. As he transitioned from a shy teenager into a global sex symbol and an incredibly powerful cultural force, the weight of the public's expectations grew exponentially, turning his personal life into a highly valuable, incredibly dangerous commodity. The absolute nightmare scenario of waking up and seeing his private, fragile love life plastered across the front pages of aggressive tabloids or trending worldwide on social media with millions of strangers offering their completely unsolicited, highly critical opinions on his choice of partner is exactly the kind of toxic, destructive environment that fundamentally destroys genuine love. For someone who feels everything so deeply, who relies heavily on his intuition, his emotions, and his artistic soul, love must absolutely remain a safe, quiet harbor in the middle of a raging, unpredictable storm. The sheer velocity of his global fame reached an entirely new, terrifying stratosphere with the release of his monumental, history-making solo debut album, Golden, an absolute pop masterpiece that shattered streaming records worldwide and firmly established him as a dominant, untouchable global pop icon on par with the biggest Western artists in history, not to mention his historic, breathtaking solo performance at the FIFA World Cup opening ceremony in Qatar, where he stood completely alone on a massive global stage carrying the immense pride of his nation and his group. While his solo album perfectly explores the complex, multifaceted nature of modern love, heartbreak, and intense physical passion through spectacular, chart-topping tracks like Seven and Standing Next to You, these cinematic musical narratives serve as a safe, highly controlled artistic outlet for his romantic expressions, allowing him to explore the concept of love as an artist without ever having to risk the terrifying, highly destructive consequences of exploring it publicly as a real human being. He understands that the media machinery would relentlessly hunt down his partner, tearing apart her past, scrutinizing her appearance, brutally analyzing her every single move, and constantly comparing her to an impossible, entirely fabricated standard of perfection, effectively stripping away her basic human rights to privacy and safety just because she chose to love Jungkook. For someone who feels everything so deeply, who relies heavily on his intuition, his emotions, and his artistic soul, love must absolutely remain a safe, quiet harbor in the middle of a raging, unpredictable storm. The sheer velocity of his global fame reached an entirely new, terrifying stratosphere with the release of his monumental, history-making solo debut album, Golden, an absolute pop masterpiece that shattered streaming records worldwide and firmly established him as a dominant, untouchable global pop icon on par with the biggest Western artists in history, not to mention his historic, breathtaking solo performance at the FIFA World Cup opening ceremony in Qatar, where he stood completely alone on a massive global stage carrying the immense pride of his nation and his group. While his solo album perfectly explores the complex, multifaceted nature of modern love, heartbreak, and intense physical passion through spectacular, chart-topping tracks like Seven and Standing Next to You, these cinematic musical narratives serve as a safe, highly controlled artistic outlet for his romantic expressions, allowing him to explore the concept of love as an artist without ever having to risk the terrifying, highly destructive consequences of exploring it publicly as a real human being. He understands that the media machinery would relentlessly hunt down his partner, tearing apart her past, scrutinizing her appearance, brutally analyzing her every single move, and constantly comparing her to an impossible, entirely fabricated standard of perfection, effectively stripping away her basic human rights to privacy and safety just because she chose to love Jungkook. For someone who feels everything so deeply, who relies heavily on his intuition, his emotions, and his artistic soul, love must absolutely remain a safe, quiet harbor in the middle of a raging, unpredictable storm. The sheer velocity of his global fame reached an entirely new, terrifying stratosphere with the release of his monumental, history-making solo debut album, Golden, an absolute pop masterpiece that shattered streaming records worldwide and firmly established him as a dominant, untouchable global pop icon on par with the biggest Western artists in history, not to mention his historic, breathtaking solo performance at the FIFA World Cup opening ceremony in Qatar, where he stood completely alone on a massive global stage, carrying the immense pride of his nation and his group. While his solo album perfectly explores the complex, multifaceted nature of modern love, heartbreak, and intense physical passion through spectacular, chart-topping tracks like Seven and Standing Next to You, these cinematic musical narratives serve as a safe, highly controlled artistic outlet for his romantic expressions, allowing him to explore the concept of love as an artist without ever having to risk the terrifying, highly destructive consequences of exploring it publicly as a real human being.